The Full Circle Podcast. Compelling interviews and incredible tales from Colorado's western slope, from the mountains to the desert. Christi Reese and her team hear from the movers, shakers, and characters of the Grand Valley and surrounding mountain towns that make the western slope the place we all love. You'll learn, you'll laugh, you'll love with The Full Circle. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to The Full Circle Podcast. I'm Christi Reese, and I am honored today to welcome our guest, Diane Schwenke, the President and CEO of the Grand Junction Area Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, as I'm sure everyone knows, you have just announced your retirement after 33 years with the Chamber of Commerce, so congratulations.
Thank you.
And thanks for your service. So many things to talk about, but let's just start with how did you get to Grand Junction?
So that's a funny story because I never actually interviewed or applied for this job. I actually, at that point in time, what was the predecessor to the Grand Junction Economic Partnership had advertised for an executive director. And I was with a small chamber back in Nebraska that did all of it, did tourism, economic development, and chamber. And so I applied, and I was one of the finalists. They flew me in, and we had interviews, and apparently I was one of the top 2 or something. They were just getting ready to come back to my community in Nebraska and talk to my leadership. And I got a call from Pat Gormley, for anyone who remembers the Gormley family. And he goes, well, we're sorry, but our executive director decided to stay. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great. It's a wonderful community. I wish you all the best. And about a week later, they called up and said, hey, we also have this chamber that we really need a director for. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, honestly, at that point in time, our Chamber of Commerce was a mess. But I said, okay, I'm willing to come out and talk to you again. And so this time my husband came with me. And at the end of the day, some of the former fathers of the community in terms of Bill Sisson and Jim Fleming and Greg Hoskin met with a lot of the board members, really loved the community. And so I accepted the position to come here. So it was almost accidental, but it was the best decision I ever made in terms of both a personal life and career, because I love the Grand Valley.
Were you very familiar with Grand Junction when you had the interview?
Not at all. The very first, when I came out and talked to the GJAP folks, was the very first time I had been, I think, across the Rockies to visit a community. I had spent a little bit of time in Greeley with their Chamber of Commerce, was familiar with Denver, but had really never even been to Colorado Springs, never even been to Glenwood Springs. And
made that trip over the pass yet?
Yeah, I hadn't done that. And actually they flew me in. So the first thing I saw was the Book Cliffs and everybody out there on their dirt bikes. And I'm like, well, this looks interesting.
Yeah.
Because I came back from where there was a lot of farmland. I grew up in northern Iowa, so everything was green and crops. And so getting used to even the concept of public lands and the fact that, you can't just drill a well for water. Right. All of these things a Midwesterner just doesn't really appreciate until you go through it. But again, it was probably the people as much as the landscape that drew me here.
And what was your experience that you had with this kind of organization that made them want to hire you?
Thank you. So I actually started out my career working for the state of Nebraska, and I worked for their Department of Transportation for a few years, and then I worked for their Department of Economic Development. And I had a territory, and I helped a lot of small communities with community and economic development. And then I actually decided that, it's great coming in and giving advice, but you never actually kind of, dig in and actually get to see a project go all the way through and help.
Yeah, follow through with it.
Yeah, the whole follow through. So I decided that I really wanted to be in a community and work for that community. So I started looking at economic development positions because that's where my roots were. And so there was a position in Greeley as the economic development manager at that point for their chamber. Went on staff there for a short period of time, got to know the folks in Colorado, actually worked on, this is ancient history for a lot of people, but I actually worked on the Sunstrand project.
Oh, wow.
As Greeley was a contender for the Sunstrand project that ultimately ended up here in Grand Junction. And Yeah. So, how things come full circle. And I was hearing about this place way out west that was also trying to attract Sunstrand. It was an interesting process. And then ultimately, I got drawn back to Nebraska to kind of head up my own organization. And I was with the Beatrice Chamber for 4.5 years. And as I've mentioned, kind of did all of it. We were a 1.5 man shop. So that, and back in those days, the way back, if you wanted to advance in this industry, as in terms of managing chambers or managing economic development organizations, typically you had to move up to a community that was larger in size.
Right.
And so Grand Junction at that time boasted an overall population of around 40 to 45,000. I was in a town of 13 to 15,000, so it was kind of a natural progression.
But the population in the valley, what would you say that it was at that time?
Oh, the whole valley? Probably 60, maybe 65,000. Yeah.
And what did the chamber look like then? You said it was kind of a mess.
It was a big mess.
When you got here, what was the state of the chamber?
So it was, the chamber had built this building, as a lot of people did in the oil shale boom and ultimate crash. They had invested in building a brand new building. They were heavily in debt. A lot of the businesses at that point in time couldn't even afford, any sort of a membership in the organization. They had foregone some city funding by backing the wrong candidates in a recall election. I mean, all kinds of interesting things going on. So when I got here, I asked, some basic questions like, how many members do we have? We think we have 450, but there was no database. There really wasn't a good, and a lot of people had been just carried on the rolls because, again, just like we did in the recent pandemic, but it was time to move on. And then after I got here, I said, well, what's the budget? And they're like, budget?
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 What do you mean budget?
They had actually gone through 3 directors in 5 years. And so they were between directors. The thing, though, again, that has always impressed me throughout the entire time was the leadership of the chamber at that point in time. They knew they had a mess. They knew they needed to make change. They had already gone out to the members who were paying and said, we need help to get stabilized here. So would you double down on your membership dues for this year so that we can really kind of get back on our feet? They refinanced the note on the building. So they were already in process, and that was probably the thing that encouraged me the most.
You saw some proactivity from the board.
The board. And in any organization like a chamber, you've got to have the board buy-in, and the board buy-in was there. I remember one of them at one point in some of the meet and greets saying, we do not want to be the chamber that goes bankrupt. But they were in some desperate straits.
And there were plenty of others at that time that were going
yes,
bankrupt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it was, but again, there had already been some real demonstrated leadership and some, let's get going, let's move forward and let's stabilize the organization and become, the organization that can really represent the community and the business community.
So from my perspective, the role of a chamber of commerce has changed greatly. I mean, as in many industries with the technology that's happened, the ability to network without being in the same place and things like that. Talk about what you saw as the chamber's role when you started and how that has evolved in your 33 years with the Grand Junction Chamber.
Well, and again, we referred to it kind of as the, most of the chambers back then were the 3P chambers. They were all about, pageants and pancake feeds and parades, but really very much event driven. And the one thing that they really did never let go of, and we haven't, is the networking in person through business after hours.
That's a really old tradition.
That predates me, wow. So that tells you how old that sucker is. But yes, and when I got here, people said, people really like to do business with people they know. And I think that has diminished changed some with the technology and coming through the pandemic and the Zoom meetings, but this is a community that still very much values the personal relationships. And so we were pretty much focused on that. And in terms of any other programming, our largest group of volunteers, they were then known as the Rangers. They are now known as the Diplomats. But that was our largest cadre of volunteers. So they were out there doing visitations with businesses, cutting ribbons. We were really trying to kind of get businesses to feel good about the fact that things were picking up, because it hadn't been that long since Black Sunday and all of the stories I heard when I got here about how those first few years were. So there was a lot in terms of just helping businesses kind of get back on their feet and grow. So yeah, that was kind of the focus of our programming. We didn't have a lot of committees at that point, and other outside of our Ranger/Diplomat group.
Mm-hmm. And so, what do you see now as the main focus of the Chamber of Commerce here, and is that mission continually evolving?
So I'll answer the second question first because it's the easiest, and the answer is yes. It is constantly, and the pace of change and evolution is picking up. But I think, now this chamber sees its role as more of a 3C chamber. So we are a catalyst for economic growth, and we are a convener of community leaders that come together to address community issues. And we're just a champion of the community and the improvement of the community and, the quality of life. That phrase wasn't used very much back in the early 90s. It was more about, is there a job for me? So all of those sorts of things. So we've changed. We're much more focused on community building, business building, being a strong voice for business. I think that probably has been the strongest thing that has appealed to our members and possibly also caused friction as we've done that. But the pace of government regulation and government basically telling you how to run your business has greatly increased in the last probably decade on both sides. So that advocacy, having somebody in the room that's a voice for you, and then comes back and tells you what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think the chamber does with communicating with its members now? I mean, is it easier to communicate and get the message out with the new technology? Is it harder? What's it like to get that information out to your members?
So it's easier to get it composed and out. It's harder to get it noticed because there is so much out there.
There's so much noise.
There's so
everywhere.
much noise, and everybody's getting 100 emails a day or sometimes an hour. And the social media is constantly in your face. So getting the message to be recognized has probably become much more challenging for us. But yes, I can remember when I was resistant to the idea of electronic newsletters. It's like, oh, nobody's going to read that. And as we've transitioned, the technology is such that people also have become skimmer scanners. So you don't do a lot of in-depth articles on issues. You need to kind of, give them a paragraph or two, and then follow up for the ones that are really interested in that topic. So while it's easier to get the message out there, it's much, much harder to get it noticed.
And I'd like to talk about the role of the chamber during the pandemic, because I think that you played such an amazing role in keeping this community, the businesses in this community, afloat by creating new programs and just being proactive with trainings and all kinds of stuff. Can you talk about how that process went for you? And I can't imagine what it was like. I'm currently on the board of directors, and we did talk about a lot of these things, but to get hit in the face as a business community with this kind of tragedy and pandemic is shocking, and trying to devise a plan to make it better is really difficult. How did you go about, and what was the process of thinking, what can we do to help our businesses?
So thank you for that, because I think that was probably the shining moment for our community and our chamber in terms of how we handled, something that was outside the control of the business community and its citizens when we did the lockdown. So our process was, I have a great team at the chamber, and I think it's important that I acknowledge that. We started meeting on a daily basis, starting the day of the governor's declaration, because we never turned off our phones. And while we were all remote, we were still on our emails, because that very first day, I remember there were lots of questions about essential businesses can stay open. Am I an essential business?
Right. We didn't even know. Now we know all about that, right?
We do. We know all about it. And we were fortunate in that we had the Zoom platform before a lot of others did, because we were already using it for our governmental affairs programming. So we had been using Zoom to communicate with our legislators over in Denver. So we had a Zoom account. So we just, all of us as a staff could Zoom together every morning, and just started saying, okay, what are they going to need? What can we do? And what can we frankly steal? Because there were other chambers out there that were like us. Let's get proactive. Let's get in front of it. Let's see what we can do to help. And they had some great ideas. And there were other chambers who just kind of basically closed the door and closed up the hole and put the covers over their heads. And so I'm really proud that we were out there. So it was like, okay, so they need to know what's an essential business. Well, let's do a webinar. We've got the capability to do it with the Zoom. And then there were questions around also where can we get PPP equipment? And then it was questions around how can we get, particularly those who were shut down for so long, like our restaurants, how can we help them? So we added a takeout toolkit to our website so that people could go order and pick up. And then there were the programs to help you with funding, which were incredibly confusing. And, PPP loans and EIDL loans, or PPP programs, those were grants. But anyway, but again, it was like, and then there's an EIDL loan. And then the city of Grand Junction, God bless them, said, we need to get money on the streets to these businesses now. So we have a program. And so our team was monitoring all of this. We all kind of brought these ideas together. We got them out quickly and electronically. And the other thing we did was, because we had strong partnerships, we were working with our partners, like the Business Incubator Center, that could come in and say, okay, we can do virtual coaching with our SBDC counselors, and let's get John on there talking about all of our programs that the incubator already had that could help you in terms of, predicting your cash flow and all of that. And so we had strong partnerships. Ironically, one of our strong partnerships that did not exist in any other community that I have found was the relationship that we had with Mesa County Public Health Department. So Jeff and his people over there, first of all, they were a member of ours. We had interacted with them on some of the healthcare issues around business. We had a relationship. And so being able to have Jeff come on and talk about how to keep your places safe, and he was, and what's going on now with the COVID, because things were moving so quickly. So being able to do all of that and leverage those relationships, I think, was key.
Yeah, and not that I'm fully aware of the processes that other communities went through, but I think that we were a little bit unique in having that relationship where our health department was not necessarily focused only on business, but really did a lot to help the businesses. It wasn't just about the healthcare side of it. It was about how do we get our businesses back open. They really focused on that.
They did, and that's unique in Jeff's character. I can't say enough about Jeff Korb, but he said from the very beginning, that yes, we want people to be healthy, but we also need a healthy economy to keep our people healthy. People isolated and sitting at home have a whole host of other problems that can come into play with regard to mental health and physical health. And so he totally understood that and really worked hard with all of us and was a huge champion with the state. again, it was pretty amazing. And I didn't see that. I had other chambers that were reaching out to us saying, how can you do these things? And I'm like, because we have a strong partner that understands economic health over at Mesa County Public Health.
Wonderful. And it's hard to believe. I don't know. I think about PPP loans. It seems like it was so long ago for me. Thank goodness. I mean, I'm glad that's way in the past. Hopefully never to be visited again, right?
For sure. But at the time, you know what, they really did do a lot in terms of helping our businesses. So there's no doubt about that. But, and again, our businesses didn't want to rely on those sorts of things. Our loan programs, even though businesses were hurting, they didn't want to take out a loan because they didn't know when they might be able to repay it. And they didn't really want to take even some of the grant funds because that's just not who we are. And we knew that because we were also surveying them about every 2 or 3 weeks saying, how you doing? What do you need? What's going on with you? And that, again, helped us get resources to them even more quickly.
How many surveys did you send out during the pandemic, would you say?
Well, during 2020, we did 8. So at least once a month. We were trying to kind of hit that balance of not bugging you, but also finding out what was going on. Altogether, we probably, we cut back on them in 2021, but we probably did throughout that 18-month period, we probably did about 15 or 16.
And invaluable information to hear from your members.
It was, and it also helped us with when we were talking to the state and we were talking to others about what the business community needed, because we have anecdotal information, which helps, but we could go in and say, hey, 40% of our membership at this point doesn't even want to look at a loan, or 20% of our businesses right now are operating on 2 months or less reserves. So we need to get some things out there on the street. We could give real-time data.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. What do you think the Grand Junction Chamber has to offer the state and the region as far as our businesses and our location and how, I mean, you have strong relationships with leaders in all areas of the state and the region. How does Grand Junction play into that and what's the future of our chamber here?
So I think overall, the Grand Junction area itself has so much to offer the state. And I think because we kind of suffer from this out of sight, out of mind mentality too often at the state, which I think is why we have kind of beefed up our presence and actually weighing in on state legislation and meeting with the governor and just kind of those sorts of things, because they don't realize all we have to offer. They don't realize, I mean, the tourism aspect of it is probably the easiest sell, and we see a lot of that. But we're also seeing a lot of people post-pandemic, the speeding up of remote workers, retirement, and we're seeing those residents move over here because we still have the kind of quality of life. And I love Christi Pollard, our former GJEP director's comment. It's like, we are the Colorado you were promised, and we're still that Colorado.
Yeah. As much as we're growing right now, it still feels like a small town.
It definitely does. And I hope we always hold on to that.
I hope so too. Speaking of GJEP, I'd like to hear about how you connected GJEP and the chamber and what you felt that the different roles of those two organizations were. I know there were some times when it got a little rocky and who's doing what and how has that progressed and where do you think it is now?
So thanks for that question, because it has been kind of all over the board. And, I've kind of lost count of how many GJEP directors I've interacted with throughout this period of time. But I think we owe the city of Grand Junction a big thank you, because they actually commissioned an economic development study back in about 2015. It was called the North Star Study. And it was like, how do we progress economically? Because we were not coming back from the recession as well as other areas were. And the consultants actually came up with, they talked to all of us, they talked to board members, they talked to businesses, and they came up with this wonderful one-pager that we actually signed off on as an MOU between our three organizations, GJEP, the incubator, and the chamber, that said, we work together on all of this. But if it is business recruitment, then there is no question that is GJEPs. They are lead, and incubator and chamber, you are playing supporting roles. If it's existing business retention expansion, chamber, you are the lead, but you have supporting roles from GJEP and the incubator. And then the incubator really is the lead when it comes to entrepreneurial and startup. And actually having that, I mean, it's not always as clear cut. It never is, but at least having that down on paper and building the relationships around it and working on projects and doing handoffs and even the working together on projects was something that has really come a long ways in the last 5 or 6 years. And that relationship, I think, will continue into the future. I think there's some roles with regard to redevelopment and some other things that maybe, again, we're all evolving, we're all changing. So I think it may be time to kind of revisit that a little bit, but actually having you take lead here, I'll support you there. Just even having that mindset helps us work so much better together for the benefit of those businesses. Mm-hmm.
3 amazing organizations with similar but different roles. And I think there is some crossover. And so I think sometimes the consumer wonders, where should I start if I need help with something? But it's good to hear that you think that those relationships are complementing each other more than ever.
They totally are, and much more than ever, much more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And again, it's one of those things where we have an agreement that, if I have a relationship with a business and that's where they feel comfortable coming into play, then that's great. And when we get to the point where, for instance, GJEP has a lead role in terms of accessing state incentives, so we have one handout at the state and not 2 or 3 competing ones, then we work together and GJEP takes on that role and we work together around that. If it's somebody that GJEP has a good relationship with already, perhaps that they've brought in and they're looking to expand, again, we have the crossover and the relationships and we just work it together. We just want to make sure there's no gaps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What would you say, Diane, are the biggest challenges that you faced during your tenure at the Chamber?
Oh, my goodness. There were lots of challenges. Probably from my perspective, a challenge that I have on an ongoing basis, and it's not a big surprise to anybody, is that we have a board of directors that serve 1 4-year term. And so the board is constantly in motion. And I think it's actually a strength for the organization. But from the, executive director, CEO seat, there's a lot of
turnover.
There's a lot of turnover on your board. So having a lot of those conversations and, resisting the we've already did that mentality sometimes is very tough. So that's
because half the people in the room don't know about what happened 3 years ago.
Well, and it may be time to do it again. But that has been a bit of a challenge. And I think the other challenge we get into, and it is that I see people silo or an organization silo. And that's just not how we move forward and how we get things done. And so I've seen that in various organizations, various government entities over the years, and trying to get through that and get to a place where we can work together has probably been hard.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say are your favorite moments or some of your successes there?
So I probably because it's in my brain engraved so deeply, but I really think the 5-star program was the success. And we all had a role to play. Jeff and his people in terms of coming up with the checklist, our role in getting businesses to jump on board, get certified for 5-star, and convince consumers it's way okay to come back into our Main Street businesses, do that. Don't just keep shopping on Amazon. So that one, I think, was a shining moment for all of us. And the others are, I'm particularly proud of 2 programs. The Mesa County Leadership Program which again, it's celebrating its like 27th, 28th year, and actually getting business people to commit to 10 months of really getting to know their community in depth in preparation for taking on leadership roles in nonprofits and planning commissions and all the rest of it. And then, there's really a soft spot in my heart for the Young Entrepreneurs Academy.
Yeah. I just got goosebumps. I think the banquet this year was the best that I've ever attended. It was, obviously we're all ready to get together again, right, and all ready to party, but it was just filled with a lot of great stories and a lot of inspiration. And the young entrepreneur that was there was really wonderful. And I enjoyed the Business of the Year. That's always a great presentation as well.
It is.
So who came up with the leadership program? Was that something that you developed?
Because
everybody that I've known that's gone through it just said it's absolutely incredible.
So I came up with the concept, and it was something I had seen in other chambers. Throughout the years, we have the, my kind of mantra was duplicate and replicate, So, I had seen it done. So I loved the concept, but probably the genius in the leadership program really comes from the volunteers. So we knew what areas we wanted to cover in terms of healthcare and education and local government. But we would gather some folks together from within the chamber boards at that time or within those industry sectors. And we've had some of those volunteers that with healthcare in particular, I think Dan Prinster has been a part of the planning for that day for probably at least 20 years. So, and the way it works is we have 2 industry experts and they plan the day. And then we get feedback and, we continually improve it. But having the people with the knowledge willing to give back is what makes our leadership program, I think, really successful.
Because how many organizations and volunteers do you think are involved with that program at any one time?
Oh, at any one time, let's see, we have at least 20 kind of day moderator folks, and then they typically will bring in somewhere between 4 and 6 additional industry experts. So at any one time, probably 100 people at least, and it does range from everybody from the mayor of Grand Junction to the county board chair, down to frontline workers in our healthcare facilities and our schools.
Mm-hmm. So your career at the chamber has not been without a little bit of conflict, but
yes.
you have really weathered it well, and I know it couldn't have been easy. Talk a little bit about why you think there's a political element to the chamber here that there may be not in other areas, and why that creates some conflict.
Sure, you bet. Yes, I've grown a very thick skin over the last 30 plus years. I think, people in their minds have different definitions of what's political and what's advocacy. And I think they sometimes confuse that. From our perspective, it has always been about what's in the best interest of business. And we've continually, even today when we sit down with new members, it's like, we don't advocate a position that lines up with the R's or lines up with the D's. We, advocate for the B's, the businesses, and we try to focus on that. And it's easier when you're further away from home. So I don't get a lot of pushback when we take positions on bills in the legislature. Where I tend to get pushback is when we do engage in some of the local elections, and that was a conscious effort, again, made by the board several years ago in terms of we're trying to be the business voice, we're trying to be heard, but at that point in time, the policymakers weren't willing to listen because they didn't have the business background. And there was the thought process of we've got to have people who understand business in office. And that's where some of the endorsement processes come in. And I know that's been very heated and it goes back and forth. And it's also something that, as I kind of look back on it, it felt like it was really, really necessary when we did it back in 2013 or whenever that was. And there was other, particularly in the West, other chambers who were doing the same thing. And then there was kind of a movement away from doing endorsements. It is, I mean, you've got to have, you've got to have your bulletproof vest on when you do that. And yet now we take a look at, for instance, even some of the extremisms we're seeing on both sides. And it's like, again, with the focus on business and the need for people to understand what actions they're taking, how their actions will affect businesses and the job creators, you've got to have people that have that understanding. And so that's kind of, if you've got your goal in mind and your focus, and it is responsive to your mission, I think there are ways you can go about doing that. And again, I also think that a lot of times, some of the folks that are most upset with what we do don't understand the process we go through, which is a very, very comprehensive process.
So there is a Governmental Affairs Committee, and they meet monthly.
The Governmental Affairs Committee is actually meeting about every 2 weeks during the Governmental Affairs, and it's our largest committee. We have 100 people on that committee. And then when we get into the endorsement piece, which is what gets us the most interest, shall we say, there's actually a separate committee, separate from the board, that actually goes through the process of vetting the candidates and making recommendations. And, the board has been in a position where they've endorsed no candidate, as they did in the third CD a couple of years ago, because they didn't feel like either one of them were going to be a good voice for business, to the point where they say, you know what, both of these people would be awesome in office, so we'll endorse both of them. But those aren't the ones that get attention in the media.
Right. If you were going to meet with a new business right now that was coming to Grand Junction, how do you approach them and tell them the value of the chamber right now? What's the elevator pitch for the Grand Junction Chamber? So
our elevator pitch is that we look to be a partner, and we did away with the term, for instance, dues a long time ago. It's an investment, and you should expect a return on your investment. So our pitch to them is, if you're looking to actually, be recognized in the community, if you're looking to connect with other business people, if you're looking to have a voice in the community and community issues, if you're interested in working on things like workforce housing and workforce development, these are the things that we offer. And they're a bit more intangible, but in the end of the day, they can affect your success or non-success as a business much more than a cash register ringing. So we've kind of de-emphasized we're going to bring you customers. And that has taken, because we can't guarantee you that you're going to get customers. Right. But
it used to be, I grew up in a small town, and Grand Junction, I think you can still consider a small town.
Right.
It's the smallest the one I grew up in. But, if there was a sticker on the window, you had a bit of pride in that, but there wasn't a lot going on besides that. A meeting once a month and a sticker on your window, and you hope that brought people in, but that's not enough anymore.
No, it definitely isn't. And so we really do emphasize the fact that we are working to build a strong business climate so that your business and your neighboring business at the end of the day can be successful. So we're going to work on those elements. We're going to work on, helping workforces. I keep bringing that up because the shortage of labor and skilled labor is a big deal, probably our top issue for many of our employers. But we're going to work on that. And we're going to focus on that for you. And we're going to actually develop ways that you can be involved in that through apprenticeships and job shadows and those sorts of things. And we are going to be loud and will be loud down at City Hall when they decide to, raise all the development fees and not necessarily take into consideration how that might impact some of our other goals in the community in terms of housing, et cetera. So we will be your voice, and we will work on the issues that will make you successful as well as other businesses in the community.
When you mentioned earlier that one of the challenges is the turnover in the board, it's got to be a little bit nerve-wracking to think for a lot of the people on the board and in the leadership in the chamber about you leaving because you've been such a consistent voice there. Tell us about the process for hiring your replacement.
Sure, you bet. Yes, Ivan is still holding it against me. Our chairman is Ivan Gear. But, we put in place, and again, the leadership caliber in this community is amazing, even with the turnover. So this was 5 years ago. So nobody who developed our succession plan at that point in time, they just looked at me and said, we need a succession plan. Maybe if you get hit with a bus, whatever might happen. And so 5 years ago, we put together a succession plan that said, here's what's going to happen with the CEO. And we have everything from how the job description is in there, the various industry outlets where you might want to advertise. We even have potential interview questions in there. And so the board has, Ivan Gear, our chairman, has selected a search committee. It's about 7 of the board members. And one of the recommendations in that plan was to look at a search firm. I know it can be expensive, but at the same time, they're all volunteers. You're a volunteer. And we want a process that will move smoothly. And frankly, from my personal selfish perspective, quickly. So they are in the process they have actually put together an RFP and sent it out to some search firms. I think they're hoping to have responses and be able to make some sort of a decision, potentially yet in April, early May. And then they'll engage the search firm to go out and actually help them identify and filter candidates to bring them into for interviews and Zooms and your normal hiring process. But I'm very impressed. I've tried to stay very hands-off, and they've been very good about doing that. But I did hear some of the elements in the RFP that they put together, which was amazing in terms of here's who we are as an organization, and here's what we need in a leader, and here's what we're looking for a search firm to help us do. They were very clear in all of that. So we'll go from there. My anticipation is that there will be candidates from outside the community and inside the community, and we probably have internal candidate as well. And so they will move through that process and make a decision. And I'm guessing somewhere around mid-July. I've told them I'm on a Viking River cruise starting July 20th, and I'd like to not come back.
Right? You might not come back.
But I also know that's a pretty aggressive time frame. And so I've allowed myself to be somewhat flexible because for me, I mean, having been invested in this organization for so many decades, I want to see it move through this transition seamlessly. And I'm pretty convinced it can do that.
And what's next for you?
I have no clue.
A little downtime?
Definitely downtime. Mm-hmm. I was having a conversation just the other night with someone who was like, well, you could do this and you could do this. And, why don't you do that? And I'm like, time out. So for at least probably 3 to 6 months, I have promised my very patient husband who retired 4 years ago, I'm just going to decompress. We're going to go play. We're going to go play in the desert.
Good.
We're going to vacation.
Because I can't imagine in the last 33 years, you've had very many weeks where you worked Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
No. Nope, not at all. So
a lot of traveling, a lot of meetings, after hours, weekends.
So yes, no. I mean, I added it up one time, and I've been at more than 300 business after hours events. I've already told the staff, I'm never doing another business after hours.
No, maybe you're going to open up a new business in town, Diane, and we'll see you there pushing the new entrepreneurial business.
Yeah, who knows? And then after that, I'll kind of take a look at, what would be a good fit for me. I'm not done in the community. This is such a wonderful place, and what makes it so wonderful is the fact that people are willing to step forward and volunteer for good causes and do good things. And so I'm sure I'll find a niche out there somewhere where I can help, and I want to do that, but don't bother me for 6 months.
Got it. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time today. I know you've got a lot on your plate because everybody wants to talk to you right now, even more than ever. But is there anything else you'd like to share about your journey and what an experience it's been?
So, I mean, again, and there are people around who remember me saying this. When I first started, they were worried because, again, they'd had 3 directors in 5 years. And I said, well, I will give you 5 to 7 years. I'll make that commitment. But after that, I'm going to be gone. I'm going to move to a larger community. I'm going to advance in my career. And they kind of come back and remind me of that now that we're at 33 years. But this community has been, first of all, the Ute curse is real. And so, but it has grown so much in the time that I've been here. I didn't need to move to see more challenges, more opportunities. And as we look toward the future, I can honestly say, as the kind of old woman in the room, I think that Grand Junction's future is so bright. And it's been built on the efforts of those who came before us. And I can't wait to see what this place looks like in 5 or 10 years.
It's changing quickly. I've been here 20 years, and I just think about this whole riverfront area and the vehicles that you used to look at when you came into town from Orchard Mesa, and how that's changed in 20 years. And the next 20 years is going to be incredible.
It is, absolutely. And again, I think, the one thing you can't always control is you can put in the infrastructure, you can do some things, but if you don't have leaders with vision, communities, will struggle. And I think we are so blessed, and I've had the opportunity to work with so many leaders with vision.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your commitment to the Grand Junction Chamber of Commerce and to the business owners here in town. And we wish you the best of luck in your retirement.
Well, thanks, Christi. And thanks for being one of those community leaders.
Thank you. Our thanks to Diane Schwenke, President and CEO of the Grand Junction Chamber of Commerce. And we will see you next time on the Full Circle podcast. Thanks for listening and watching. Bye. Thanks for listening. This is Christi Reese signing out from the Full Circle podcast.